This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Been looking forward to this segment since the deal was signed recently. James Teague joining halftime every Friday right about now to talk some Arkansas baseball. James, of course, a former Razorback pitcher. He appeared with the Hogs parts of 3 seasons from 2014 through 2016. Of course, part of that 2015 College World Series ball club. And James also represents the Teague Law Firm. So from the pitcher's mound to the courtroom, James, not the only guy who's done it, but that happened pretty quickly. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to touch base and check in. How are you doing?
I'm all right. We got baseball in a week, man. I mean, there's excitement abounding, though there's excitement. I wouldn't say that it's disappointment. It's just you're disappointed for the injury to Jaxon Wiggins because, I mean, the kid's got a lightning arm, and I think there were heavy expectations on him for this year. Reports, and I saw him pitch a little in the fall. He'd had himself a great fall season. You never know with those elbow injuries, though. It's like there's a rash of those injuries, and it's been a long time now in baseball for the last 15, 20 years, James. Did you ever deal with an elbow injury like that? You didn't have to have Tommy John while you pitched at Arkansas, but did you ever deal with elbow injuries?
So I did not, but Phil, I think we're seeing injuries a little bit more common in today's game. You know, we're seeing guys throwing much higher velocities, and we're seeing, it's not uncommon to have multiple guys, 95, 96, 97, and I think the reality is there's just more injuries that come with that. It's really tough to see him go down at the start of the season. There's so much enthusiasm and excitement, and how's it going to shape up and everything, and, it's terrible to see. Me personally, I had some injuries here and there, some nagging injuries, but no major surgeries, no Tommy John, but, it's hard to say. It's not always in the back of your mind when you feel a pinch in the elbow of, is this the one that's going to take me out? So, like you said, it is really tough to see. I think fortunately we've got a lot of depth from the pitching position, and I think we can fill that role, but it's really tough to replace, a projected top-round pick that just was showing so much potential at the start of the year.
I was going to ask about the idea of that always being in the back of your mind. Like, even if you're not injured, if you don't feel that tweak, it's just was it like a feeling like because you threw hard enough. I mean, you weren't 100 miles an hour or anything like that, but I remember watching you. You got it into the 90s, and it's like you can't. You trust your conditioning. You trust what your coach is doing with you. You've worked on your mechanics, for almost since you were born, almost in some cases. But there's just like the idea that it's an unnatural motion, throwing above your head like that. That's why softball pitchers can throw, 21 innings on a weekend on occasion, and baseball pitchers need 3 weeks in order to get that done. It's just an unnatural motion. So I guess that's just something that's stuck in the back of your mind sometimes, that this could just happen because injuries to pitchers like that occur.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I don't always think there's a reason or there's something to blame or to say it was this or that or this program or throwing. Sometimes these things just happen. And, some people's mechanics, I think, make them more prone to this type of injury. But, there's a lot of throwing that goes into being a Division I pitcher. There's a lot of prep work, a lot of throwing, a lot of bullpens, a lot of games, and sometimes it just works out a way that, these injuries happen. But, I know that he'll bounce back. He'll have the surgery. I saw he's already scheduled down there in Arlington to have it with the doctor down there. And, I think that he's going to be great. It just stinks, obviously, as a Hog fan, not to get to see him perform, and show out, as we were kind of hoping this would kind of be his big breakout season, to be the guy that we kind of always thought he maybe could have been, to actually kind of put all the pieces together.
James, Matt Jones here. As a former player, I always liked every year meeting with the officials and the referees and kind of going over some rule changes. What are your thoughts on this 10-run rule? And as a player, or would you be for it?
Well, Matt, good to check in with you. I'm kind of in the middle. I like the traditional rules. I like the game to kind of stay as it is, but I also recognize some people like to see things sped up. They like to see the game progress, and whether it be a pitch clock or it be this run rule. We see changes at the major league level happening all the time, and then now college level lagging behind a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm for it or against it, but there's always going to be both sides of that when you're messing with a game that has those purists, those traditionals who love to just see the game as it's always been.
Have you seen any games with the pitch clock yet? I watched some minor league baseball games last year that used the pitch clock, and you couldn't even tell, but you could tell the game was moving along and it's not a brisk pace. I think it's moving along more at the pace that the game was intended to be played at. Kind of the way they played it in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s before things really started to slow down. And the pitch clock is going to be a thing for college baseball this year. They're paying a heck of a lot more attention to it. As a pitcher, you want to be able to set the pace to the game, but faster is always better than slower, isn't it?
Well, if you're throwing a lot of strikes, faster's better. But sometimes, if you get off a little bit, then you need to slow down. You need to regroup. You need to have a mound visit. Kind of do these things. I think for guys who like to stay in the groove, they like to work quick. They like to attack hitters. Faster usually is better. So I think the pitchers can kind of dictate that based on how they're doing and what their preference is. I agree with you. I don't think that the hitter needs to step out and adjust his gloves and look at the sky and mess around outside the box between every pitch. I think the faster pace is better for fans and for pitchers and for players. But maybe there's a middle ground there, not a strict clock that needs to be enforced. But like you just stated, the game seems to be kind of following the path of what it would anyways if the pitch clock wasn't there. I think that's where it's supposed to be.
A lot of expectations for this Arkansas baseball team. We saw the football team be a top 10 team for a little bit. We saw the basketball team be in the top 25s, and both of them kind of faltered out. Do you think this baseball team can hold up and be a top 10 team and make it back to Omaha this year?
Well, I do. I think, and that's because of the depth that I think this team brings. I think, to really make a run late in the season, you need that depth. And one thing that I think Van Horn does such a tremendous job at is putting the pieces together as the season goes along. Some days we get blown out at home in a midweek and, fans are upset and, understandably so. But, there's things that we're learning from those games. We're learning, who can produce, who can't, who can we trust in the big spot, maybe who isn't ready yet. And the same with the starting rotation, who's going to give us some depth, who's going to give us some innings, who can get outs. And so I think when you have a lot of depth, especially from the pitching staff, you're going to be able to move those pieces around as the season goes on and figure out, okay, when we get into conference play, when we get closer to the end of the season, what have we learned throughout the course of the season to know that we now have the pieces in the right spot? And I think Hobbs and Van Horn are just do a tremendous job at that. And I think that's why we see them have success year in and year out. They not only have great players, they create a great culture, but they also know how to put the pieces together. And fortunately, this year we have a lot of pieces to work with from a pitching staff, from all the reports from the fall and everything else. Well,
what it means at times, and you are this kind of pitcher, you got to be ready to go in at a moment's notice. Because you got to be like a Swiss Army knife. James, in his career, made 49 appearances as a pitcher at Arkansas, 12 starts. The rest were in relief. And there's a season where he about split things evenly between the bullpen and the starting rotation. So I'm assuming you're given at least like 24 hours, a little bit more notice before you start in most cases. But you still have to be ready no matter what. And that's one thing, that's an aspect of this pitching staff. I think the rotation could change every once in a while if they feel like a pitcher needs a weekend off, because they don't need to ride anybody so hard. At least that's the way that it looks going into the season. But, it's different like in the majors where you kind of know your starting pitchers are the starting pitchers. You know your relievers are the relievers. Things don't shake out that way until sometimes they don't shake out ever. It's just, roles change throughout a college baseball season. And that's one thing that stood out to me once I started doing the college broadcast, James, is rotations don't always stay the same. Relief roles don't always stay the same. You just got to be ready, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we saw a great example of that with Hagen Smith last year. He's really did well throughout the course of the year as a starter, and then we get into regional play, and he's coming out of the bullpen, and we kind of saw a little bit of a different guy, a little bit of a different mentality. And, for him, I think shaking that up and kind of getting him back into attack mode out of the bullpen was what he needed to get back on track. And we may see some of that this year with Freddie Tigert, whether he, continues to be in that relief position, kind of that closer role, or if they can stretch him into a starter. I think, before Wiggins went down, there was maybe going to be some of that with him as well. I think he was, pegged in to be a big-time starter. But you bring up a great point in that so many things happen from opening day, to the time you get to postseason. 2015 started opening day and then went straight to the bullpen. It wasn't really cut out to be a great starter. Didn't have the command, needed to really go deep in games. And so I had to fight your way back in the bullpen. And so I think there's going to be a lot of those storylines that we're going to be able to follow throughout the course of the season. Who kind of shows the role that they were kind of meant to be in. I think those things kind of work themselves out as the season goes on, just based on how guys perform, based on the opportunities they get, and based on what the coaches are seeing and what roles that they want to see them perform at. And I'm excited to see all those storylines unfold, to see how these guys perform.
Well, and you also know it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Or it's really
exactly
how things are going in the middle of the season. You go back and look at that 2015 team that made it to the College World Series. You guys had to get really hot from about the third or fourth week of SEC play to the end of it just to make the NCAA tournament. You went on the road as a 2 seed, and I think there were some prognostications that had Arkansas as a 3 seed that year. When you go back and look at 2015 and everything that went into that season, are you surprised that team made it to Omaha?
Well, I think it's fair to say that everyone was pretty surprised that he made it to Omaha. I mean, it was by the end of the year, between injuries and between guys going out and our depth, it appeared on paper as kind of a ragtag bunch. But I think that, we had a good culture, that we had a good group of guys who were really close, who really wanted to win, and who knew that, we may not have on paper the greatest staff. We may not have, this high draft pick or this or that, but we were going to compete and show up. And I think that kind of got us over the hurdle. We obviously had Zach Jackson, who was giving us great innings out of extended relief out of the bullpen, as well as some other guys. But with this team, I think if they can match that culture, they can match that intensity, they can match that desire to show up every day and work, and then also have the talent on top of that they have. I think that's really where you see teams go to the next level.
Well, Benny took that big step forward that year. I mean, he had the injured wrist the year before, and then all of a sudden, wow, 400 batting average, 20 jacks, Golden Spikes Award. Every year that a team goes to the College World Series, and this isn't just at Arkansas, it's everywhere else, somebody takes a giant leap forward, either because they're healthy or they just figured something out, like Kevin Kopps in 2021. Connor Nolan figured some things out last year. You never really know who's going to take that leap forward. You just have like a sense in the back of your mind, somebody's going to take that big jump. And I wonder who it's going to be this year. I thought it would be Wiggins. I think Hagen Smith can take that giant leap forward, and Peyton Stovall, I think, is going to take that big jump.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think Benny, he was always meant to be a star, just based on his moxie and his makeup and his talent. It was just a matter of him putting it together. For me, I would like to see Brady Tigert. I'm really curious to see how his season plays out, because, the breaking ball is obviously unbelievable. He's got a great fastball to go with it. If he could find ways to mix those two, throw the fastball for a strike enough to where that breaking ball is even more deadly, and throw enough strikes and command the ball to be a starter, I mean, the sky is kind of the limit for him. So I'm curious to see the role that he fits into. Maybe they want to push him into that starter role more with Wiggins being out, or maybe they say, we want you to affect 2 games a weekend instead of 1 and come out of the bullpen and play and be in that closer role. So I'm really looking forward to that story. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's always guys who are going to break out and perform, and you really need that, to make a run late into the season.
Well, I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing this throughout the baseball season, and hopefully it goes deep into June, because you know what that means if we're doing these segments in the middle or the latter part of June. But man, I mean, you got a good thing going as with the Teague Law Firm. You ended your pitching career 2018. How quickly did it take you to get through law school? And tell me what you think about practicing law.
Well, I was on the road in pro ball studying for the LSAT, so there was a little bit of overlap there. I knew which direction I was wanting to go. But yeah, it was just a quick 3 years, got through law school, graduated, passed the bar, and so here we are. And I'm kind of jumping on, with the Teague Law Firm, and they've got 30 years of experience, primarily focusing in family law and in criminal practice. And so I'm walking into an environment that is very well prepared, that has had just really a ton of experience in the Northwest Arkansas area. And, sometimes you say family law and people say, oh, how is that? But, it's kind of ironic. It's kind of like pitching on Friday night because, the stakes are high, very emotional. But, if you show up every day and you think, I'm here to fight for you and I'm here to battle for these people and get them what they deserve. It's kind of similar like showing up on Friday night, battling for your team. So there's a little bit of overlap there as far as mentality, but I'm just really grateful to, join on in the staff here and, piggyback on the 30 years of experience in the Northwest Arkansas area.
Last thing, you're an Oklahoma native. They listed Bartlesville as your hometown. With Oklahoma joining the SEC, what does that do, for you as far as like social circles with friends that you had from Oklahoma? And you think it's going to be an adjustment period for OU to join the SEC in baseball?
Well, I hope it is, so we can finally put to rest the SEC Big 12 discussion. I think anyone who's playing the SEC or is an SEC fan, they're a little biased. SEC's the best of the best, but growing up in Oklahoma, some people would like to argue that. So I'm actually excited to say, okay, well, now we get to find out for real. So,
James, appreciate you, man. Looking forward to doing this throughout the season. Have a great weekend, and we'll do it again Friday on opening day next week.
Yeah, Phil, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to, getting to talk baseball with you for the rest of the season.
BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from the NFL and bowl season to esports. You'll find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. We're the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.